So that'll be the core training for this first 80-day retreat. I imagine that we'll be holding multiple retreats over the coming months and years on those same themes, because I have found, having already led 2 retreats for 3 months focusing on those same practices, they turned out to be really wonderfully beneficial. I myself have spent roughly 4 years in solitary meditative practice. I've been meditating for 38 years, but in terms of just living in retreat, focusing entirely on meditation, roughly 4 years by now. So I have some taste, a little bit of experience, and so I will be the director of this contemplative observatory, the primary instructor, but I do anticipate we'll be bringing in other teachers from different traditions over time, and we'll be focusing not only on the cultivation of attention, of metacognition, and a cultivation of these qualities of the heart, but then as we progress and people have established a firm foundation in this elemental or foundational training, then further 80-day retreats that will then explore more deeply different aspects of consciousness, dimensions of consciousness. I envision that we'll have an 80-day retreat that will be all about the cultivation of altruism, much more deeply cultivating loving kindness, compassion, learning how to transform everything that comes our way, transforming everything into spiritual maturation, into the cultivation of wisdom, compassion, and so on. So I think that could keep us well occupied for 80 days. Beyond that, in Buddhist tradition, there's a whole array of practices that entail active contemplative inquiry, probing into the nature of the body from a first-hand perspective, into the nature of feelings, mental states, and processes, probing contemplatively through first-person observation, direct experiential inquiry, into the interrelationship between what is occurring in the body and the mind, psychosomatic interactions, the body, mind, and the environment, and attending closely to these causal interactions. And then in the midst of this, seeking out fundamental issues like where do we fit in as human beings in terms of our own personal identity? What are the true causes of suffering and the true causes of happiness? So basic existential probes into some central features of our own existence here. Probing above all into the very nature of the mind, probing into the very nature of consciousness itself, not simply by studying brain correlates or behavior or interrogating people about their mental states. The idea here is to probe the mind with very refined, finely focused attention, as it were a telescope for the mind, and to discover phenomena that otherwise lie beyond the threshold of consciousness. So an 80-day retreat that's all about the cultivation of insight. Beyond that, there are even more advanced practices probing even more deeply into the very nature of awareness, exploring whether consciousness does in fact originate at conception or sometime in the womb, or whether there might be some dimension of consciousness that actually precedes this life. And let that be an empirical question, not simply a metaphysical one to ponder philosophically. And life-wise, to probe the question with an open mind. Is there any empirical evidence that there might be continuity of consciousness beyond this life? Not taking this as a religious creed or an article of faith or philosophical speculation, but finally, let us finally turn this into an empirical question. Just as Galileo was an empiricist, not just speculating about the stars, the planets, sun and moon, but attending closely. That's what catalyzed the great scientific revolution of astronomy and physics. We have yet to experience a great scientific revolution in the study of the mind. So a sequence of 80-day retreats is how we will start. A relatively brief period, 80 days of intensive training, people meditating 8, 10 hours a day, gathering together as a group, maybe 2 hours a day, meeting with people individually each week to help them in their meditation. I'm anticipating meditating about 9 hours a day myself during this, so I'm looking forward to that aspect of it especially. But then once people have gone through an 80-day period of intensive training, there's very likely to be some significant percentage of them, judging by past experience, of people who feel this 80 days really acquainted me with the practice. I now know how to do this practice. I'm inspired. I've got the taste. I want to go deeper. And I couldn't explore everything. I couldn't make all the discoveries I want to make in 80 days, but I know how. So what to do? I'd like to go off for a year. I'd like to go off for 2 years, maybe longer. Maybe this is my vocation for life. This is what my life is all about. To explore the dimensions of consciousness and to tap into and make manifest the inner resources of my own awareness, to ask the most deeply existential questions about my own existence and the relationship with the environment around me, the world at large. This is what my life is all about. So what can we do for such people? I'm now networking with an a number of people, individuals, centers around the world who are creating retreat centers on different continents, in Australia, in South America, in Europe, in North America, in Asia, in Mongolia, for example. People creating what we could call satellite retreat centers where people, after they've had very rigorous training, can go off for a year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years for very low cost. We're anticipating maybe maximum $15 a day, just covering utilities and food, and be able then just to apply themselves to practice single-pointedly as professionals, as professional contemplatives, as we have professional astronomers, neuroscientists, doctors, and so forth. Let this be a profession where people have not only a week-long retreat or an 80-day seminar, but go in and conduct the research, probing into the very nature of their own minds, transforming, purifying their own minds, and doing so single-pointedly for months or even years on end,